It is good to be with you today. I'm assuming you're all going to be looking this way. Apparently we had a TV go down over here. I heard a story from Minister Brian Wilkerson. He was sharing this story. He said, years ago, we had our kids, when they were young, we had taken them to a themed restaurant. All the TVs on the walls played classic cartoons, no sound. Our youngest son was about 4 years old at the time, and his eyes were glued to a TV screen. He was watching a continuous loop of the Roadrunner. He kept watching Wile E. Coyote strap a rocket-propelled roller skates on, or shooting himself out of a cannon, or launching himself from a giant slingshot, all to pursue the elusive Roadrunner. After watching intently for a long time, he had an epiphany. Without taking his eyes off the screen, he quietly announced to our entire family, no matter what he does, he's never going to get that chicken. Isn't that the human storyline? No matter what we do, we're never going to beat sin or death. No matter how much self-help books we read, no matter how many promises we make ourselves, and others, by the way, sin continues. It wreaks havoc on our careers, on our relationships, on our lives. No matter how many peace treaties we sign, no matter how many relief efforts we launch, we still can't fix what's wrong with this world. No matter how many vitamins you take, no matter how much exercise you participate in, no matter how well you eat, no matter how many advances we make in medicine, we just can't beat death. No matter what he does, he's never going to get that chicken. That's what every human being has been saying since Adam and Eve lived out their own version of this same story. I'm going to just break it all down for you this morning. Complete transparency. That's how I often feel when I come to this book that we're getting ready to look at for the next month. And you're like, why would you bring a book that is discouraging, depressing? Why are we looking at this book of Ecclesiastes? What is the point? We aren't even sure. You know, we feel like surely it shouldn't be something we should study because we want to be encouraged. We want to be built up. And yet, even in Ecclesiastes, in describing itself, Solomon says, everything is meaningless, says the teacher, completely meaningless. So we're looking at a book where right off the bat, Solomon says, everything is meaningless. By the way, the meaningless is a Hebrew word. It's translated from havel. Could mean vanity or nothingness or void or empty or vapor or smoke. And so right from the beginning, Solomon stands up and he says, everything you think will provide purpose in your life is like chasing smoke. In fact, I was trying to figure out how to illustrate this, and this idea came to my mind. So here it is. I'm going to help you understand the book of Ecclesiastes all in one fell swoop. Here we go. You ready? Here's the point. You ever watch kids try to chase bubbles and catch them? Every time they get one, it just pops in their hand. It just blows away. There you go. That was Ecclesiastes. You're like, all right, sermon over. Series over. We're done. He's already told us what it is. It's like chasing bubbles. And that's exactly what it is. I've had enough discouragement in my life. So why do I want to look at this book? Where Solomon essentially addressing all sorts of issues, wisdom and happiness and productivity and significance and money. He calls it all smoke. Why would I want to look at this? Well, the reason why is because eventually he reveals the secret. Eventually he tells us the point. It is meaningless. It is smoke. It is trying to catch bubbles, but only when we view it from our vantage point alone. If we stop looking at everything from our vantage point and start looking at it from God's vantage point, everything changes about this book. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13, we're there early. All right, woo, we're excited about this. Says the whole story. That's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey His commandments, for this is everyone's duty. That really is the secret to this sermon series this morning and for the entire month. We're going to be hanging on to this idea. Everything is meaningless smoke, the chasing of bubbles, if we refuse to trust and listen to and obey God. In fact, just to let you know, Solomon actually puts an important little segment in this letter that I think is important to us as well. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 11. Yet God has made everything beautiful in its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. I love this idea that God has placed in every human heart eternity. It's like saying God has placed in every human heart a God-shaped hole. And we try to fill it. Humanity tries to fill it with all sorts of stuff. We dump everything we can into that hole. We try to fill it with sex. We try to fill it with money. We try to fill it with drugs and alcohol. We try to fill it with all sorts of things that do with pleasure or careers. And yet, after trying everything we can and realizing that nothing satisfies, we finally come to the answer: only God satisfies. And so, like Solomon, we need to recognize the fear of God, reverence and awe of God, and trust in God, trusting Him enough to obey Him, is exactly what this entire letter is all about. So there is the sermon's point. That is the series point. And I know you're thinking, well, we could just end there, but I'm just going to let you know we're not going to do that. I'm not going to let you off that easy. We're going to continue. So we're starting in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. We're going to jump through the book. We're not going to be in every single chapter. But today, we're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, starting in verse 12. This is what it says. I, the teacher, was king of Israel, and I lived in Jerusalem. I devoted myself to search for understanding and to explore by wisdom everything being done under heaven. I soon discovered that God has dealt a tragic existence to the human race. I observed everything going on under the sun, and really, it is all meaningless, like chasing the wind. What is wrong cannot be made right. What is missing cannot be recovered. I said to myself, look, I am wiser than any of the kings who ruled in Jerusalem before me. I have greater wisdom and knowledge than any of them. So I set out to learn everything from wisdom to madness and folly, but I learned firsthand that pursuing all of this is like chasing the wind. The greater my wisdom, the greater my grief. To increase knowledge only increases sorrow. We start with wisdom here this morning. That's what we're going to focus on, wisdom. Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, says chasing wisdom is like chasing the wind. It is havel. It is trying to grasp smoke. In 1 Kings, it describes Solomon. It says, God gave Solomon very great wisdom and understanding and knowledge as vast as the sands of the seashore. In fact, his wisdom exceeded that of all the wise men of the East and the wise men of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else, including Ethan the Ezrahite and the sons of Mahol, Heman, Calico, and Darda. His fame spread throughout all the surrounding nations. He composed some 3,000 proverbs and wrote 1,005 songs. He could speak with authority about all kinds of plants, from the great cedar of Lebanon to the tiny hyssop that grows from the cracks in a wall. He could also speak about the animals, birds, small creatures, and fish. and kings from every nation set their ambassadors to listen to the wisdom of Solomon. We come to this letter and we have to ask ourselves, can we imagine the wisest, smartest human being ever in the entirety of all creation, who ever was and ever will be? He proclaims, wisdom is worthless. Knowledge gets you nowhere. It is all a pursuit of the wind, and we hear this and we're deflated in front of it. So what possible encouragements or lessons can we learn from this text? Well, the first one is this. Only living for this life is going to bring frustration. Only living for this life brings frustration. If you are only living for this life, you are going to be frustrated. You might as well just pack your bags, recognize that you are going to live right in the midst of frustration for the rest of your life if you're only living for right now, for here and now. 13 and 14, this is what he says. Let me read it to you again. I devoted myself to the search for understanding and to explore by wisdom everything being done under heaven. I soon discovered that God has dealt a tragic experience to the human race. I observed everything going on under the sun and really it is all meaningless like the chasing of wind. Solomon says under heaven and under the sun, Solomon's saying, I am so frustrated because everything I tried to do from this side, from my vantage point, all left me feeling unsatisfied, all left me frustrated and overwhelmed. I searched for all knowledge, and all I came up with on this side was this sense of lacking. It never really brought any closure, fulfillment into my life. You know what? All the knowledge of this world, if you take God out of it, all it really leaves you with is torture and pain rather than fulfillment and gain. All of the knowledge, if you knew everything there was to know, but you took God out, then you're just left with empty knowledge that just brings pain and torture to your soul. In 1 Corinthians, Paul tells us where wisdom comes from. He says, but to those who called by God to salvation, both Jews and Gentiles, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. Paul reveals something to us that Solomon is also trying to reveal to us, and that is wisdom is only found in God from his viewpoint, from recognizing that he is the one who provides all understanding for what is going on in this life. Now, that doesn't mean we are always going to understand, but he's the one who has that understanding. Andrew Clavin, I said the wrong name there, is a popular writer of mysteries. 1990, there was a movie put out for his book, True Crimes. In 2001, Don't Say a Word was put out. He was interviewed by World Magazine. They were asking about his writing process, and he finally started to describe his conversion to Jesus. He said, my life has been more like one of those outward bound programs where they drop you far from home and you have to make your way back with a piece of string and a matchbook. I was born and raised a Jew and came up in that wonderful secular intellectual tradition that teaches you to analyze everything. God kept coming in my life, and I kept disproving him. I was very good at disproving him. Fortunately, however, I could also disprove the foundations of my disproof. And eventually, I saw that the pillars of secular consensus, scientism, materialism, rationalism, were all made of sand. Whereas the deeper I went into the experience of God, the more I found life in abundance. In Colossians chapter 3, it says this. Colossians 3, since you've been raised to new life with Christ, set your sights on the realities of heaven where Christ sits in the place of honor at God's right hand. Think about the things of heaven, not the things of earth. Simply put, Solomon is saying, if you keep looking at this life, from this life, you are going to be frustrated. But if you will look at this life with a heavenly perspective, you will recognize just how different, how blessed, how satisfied you can be. Let me ask you a question. When you are constantly reading the Financial Times or looking at that scrolling ticker of the stock market on your computer or on your phone, where are your eyes? Are your eyes on earthly things or your eyes on heavenly things? Or when you are more worried about who your NFL team drafted in the first round or the third round or the fifth round or whatever, if you're more worried about that than sharing your faith with your neighbor or your family member, where are your eyes? Are they on earth or are they on heaven? When you can pick a fight over politics, you can shout and scream about, quote, what is right, end quote. But at the very same time, you won't speak up or stand up for a coworker who's being dragged through the mud, or when crude jokes are told at work. Where are your eyes? Are they on earth or are they on heaven? Solomon says, when I kept my eyes on earthly things from an earthly perspective, all I found was frustration. But the good news is you don't have to keep your eyes there. You could eventually look from God's perspective. Second thing we know from this text is you can't change the past, just the future. Again, let me read verse 15. What is wrong cannot be made right. What is missing cannot be recovered. We all wish we could change the past. At least I do. Maybe you're not one of those people, but I wish I hadn't said things that I have said. I wish I didn't do things that I have done. I wish I would have done some things that I didn't do. I wish I would have chosen differently in this situation and that situation. And Solomon is saying, none of that can change. You know what? Without God, there's no hope of changing any of those things. But with God, even though we actually can't change the past, you know what we can change? We can change its effect on us in the future. God can change the past's effect on us in the future. I can't change what I've done, but God can change who I am, where I'm going, and what He's going to do with what I've done. My past can serve as a rudder directing me into the future. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we're told this. It says, so we have stopped evaluating others from a human point of view. At one time, we thought of Christ merely from a human point of view. How differently we know Him now. This means that anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone. A new life has begun. God sent Jesus so that all of us could escape the effects of our past. God sent Jesus so all of us could be created anew. God sent Jesus so that our futures could be transformed regardless of our past. Solomon says, I searched for everything and I couldn't change one single decision I made in the past. But with God and obedience to God, everything can be changed about our future. There's no amount of worldly knowledge that can save you, cleanse you, or redeem you from your past. But the knowledge of Jesus and the acceptance of His gift can do that in an instance. And that's what Solomon wants you to understand. That's right, you can't change the past, but God can change your future. And then the last lesson is that there isn't always a solution. There isn't always a solution. I said to myself, look, I am wiser than any of the kings who ruled in Jerusalem before me. I have greater wisdom and knowledge than any of them. So I set out to learn everything from wisdom to madness and folly, but I learned firsthand that pursuing all this was like chasing the wind. The greater my wisdom, the greater my grief. To increase knowledge also increases sorrow. I don't like listening to what Solomon is saying through this first chapter, but he is saying a truth that we all need to grab hold of. We'd like to think we can come up with the answers somehow on our own. We'd like to think if we knew enough, we would understand enough to have all the answers. But sometimes we just have to accept that we will never have all the answers. But God has all the answers. You remember Adam and Eve? Surely you do. The very first couple created. You know what the first temptation was? Satan came, the serpent came to tempt them to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In fact, in Genesis chapter 3, this is what it says. God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. So, this is what Eve does. The next slide. The woman was convinced. She saw that the tree was beautiful and its fruit looked delicious, and she wanted the wisdom it would give her. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. Then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. Let me ask you a question. Was Adam and Eve having more joy, fulfillment, satisfaction before or after eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Did more knowledge in their life bring them more freedom and joy and excitement, or did more knowledge in their life bring them sorrow and grief and shame? If that guess was for the second, you're right. God doesn't promise we will understand everything. What God promises is that He has a plan and we will be victorious if we hold on to it. Remember what Jesus says in John chapter 20? Jesus told him, "You believe because you've seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me." Remember what the Hebrew writer says in chapter 11? "And it is impossible to please God without faith. Anyone who wants to come to Him must believe that God exists and that He rewards those who sincerely seek Him." You know, we are called to a life of faith. We will never understand everything, never. Not while under this sun, not while on this side of heaven, but we must live trusting that the one we serve, the one and only Father, the one and only God, does know everything. I don't know if you'd agree with me or not, but over the last 50 years, there's been an explosion in knowledge, don't you think? I mean, you know, this has all happened pretty much in my adult life. In 1993, the public was able to access the World Wide Web, and that began to give us the access to information from everywhere. In the late 90s and early 2000s, GPS became accessible to every single person. And what GPS did was they allowed us to say to our phone, "Hey, navigate to such and such an address." And all of a sudden, you could just be taken there, turn by turn, right to the place it made paper maps essentially obsolete. The phone in your pocket right now that you have, or maybe in your hand that you're playing the game on, whichever it is. But that phone that you're carrying around, it has more computing power in it than all of NASA had in 1969 when they put a man on the moon. In the last few years, you could ask AI to write a paper for you, respond to your emails, summarize books or conversations, keep track of your schedules, design work projects, and all of that is just scratching the surface of AI's scary possibilities. In fact, you might be wishing that Todd had asked AI to write this sermon this morning. And maybe I should have. But here's the point. Are we as a people, because of this access to knowledge that we have, are we as a people happier, more content, more satisfied, and more fulfilled now than we were 30, 40 years ago? No. We're not happier. We're not enjoying life more. We're not more excited. You know why? Because knowledge is not the key. Knowing the Lord is the key. Here's the point of today and pretty much all the rest of these sermons. Life is meaningless without God. All the knowledge in the world is worthless without God. An office filled with diplomas means absolutely nothing without God. Remember that old saying? It's not what you know, but who you know. You know what? That's right. That's absolutely right. It's who you know. So let me ask you this morning, the question that I kept wrestling with the whole time I'm preparing this sermon, still wrestling with at this moment, is my perspective, is your perspective from under the sun, from this side of heaven? If it is, if I'm pursuing life from that perspective, then I am chasing after smoke and I'm only going to find frustration and sorrow. But if my perspective is from God and His Son, then and only then will I find satisfaction, purpose, and the real answers to life. What and who are you pursuing this morning? We pray with me. God, I thank you for your word. We come into Ecclesiastes, and just to be honest, Lord, I am struggling with this book already. And I even know the answer, and I know the point that we're supposed to be looking to you, following you, being in reverence and awe of you, and obeying everything you say. I know that is the point. I know that's what Solomon is saying from the get-go. And yet as I read through it, I realize that I'm not always focused on the point. So often my focus is from under the sun. My focus is from under heaven rather than my eyes on heavenly things. So Lord, I pray that you will help me. I pray that you'll help each one here. If we're being distracted, if we're being taken away, if we're being moved farther and farther from you because our focus is wrong, help us to renew our focus. If there's things in our life that need to be removed from our lives so that we can renew our focus on you, help us remove those. Let us just have the courage to say, I'm no longer going to pay for that subscription. I'm no longer going to carry that around in my pocket. I'm no longer going to look at that every single moment of every single day. Lord, I pray that we will recognize that wisdom without you is worthless. But you and all that you bring, all that you proclaim, all that you tell us, and all that you call us to do is everything. Lord, we love you and praise you and thank you for Jesus. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.